that said, I want to go ahead and hand this over to Stan Luboff, and he is the Capital Programs Manager for Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Stan is a very funny guy, so you might think this stuff and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to share what I think is a very exciting program with both the small businesses and the lenders out there in the market. You have my contact information here. If you send me an email, I'll also send you not only my contact information, but also that of my colleague, Arthur Williams. And others. So let's just say if you send me an email asking for your local contacts, I'll be glad to get that for you. What I'm going to tell you early this year, the state legislature swept all of the funds that the Business Finance Division had for its we had no money, and we had programs that basically became dormant. However, fortunately, the federal government came through with some funding that we're now going to be putting out into the market, frankly, as quickly as we can, as quickly and efficiently as we can. So I'm going to be covering the origin of the state small business though they're not so burdensome for you as they are for us, where we are now, and then I'll talk about our new products, which in some cases are old products made new and vibrant and flexible, and then there are other new products that you'll be quite amazed to see the state of Illinois involved in. First, the origin. On September 27th, 2010, President Obama signed the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. You may be familiar with some parts of it at least, because many of you have heard about changes in SBA programs, especially the SBA 504 program that allows refinancing Act of 2010. Title II involves tax and accounting changes, which you should speak to your accountants about, that benefit small business. Title IV involves a program for the U.S. Treasury to invest in preferred shares in small community banks, encouraging them to make loans to small businesses. But our main interest is Title III. Title III is the State Small Business Credit Initiative. What they did was, the Small Business Jobs Act was $30 billion. And that was part and applied it to the Small Business Jobs Act, and then shaved off another $1.5 billion of that $30 billion to create the State Small Business Credit Initiative. The idea of the program is to give funds to states that they can then use to encourage banks to make loans that they would not make without assistance. In essence, it's to kick the banks in the butt and say, hey, look, we're going to take a large amount of the risk or provide you with some collateral support, but we need you to make loans to small businesses. The $1.5 billion wasn't part of a contest. It wasn't a lottery of any kind. It was actually an allocation based on the population of each state and that state's unemployment experience during 2008 and 2009. Don't want to give us all that money at once. So what they're doing is they're giving it to us in thirds, 33%, 33%, and 34%. Some of those funds can be used for administration, but you'll be glad to hear that it's only between 3 and 5% that can be used for admin. The entire amount, basically, of these funds are going to help small businesses. Now, on that one-third, 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 what they're sort of saying is, okay, once we use 80% of that first third, we get the second third. And once we use 80% of that second third, we get the third third. Doesn't that sound like fun? The problem is, we only have about 21 months left to do it. We have to ask for that third, that last third, before July 29, 2013. If we don't, it's likely we will not get that last 26 million. Now, how many of you formally that if we don't get that third 26 million, that law allowing the death penalty to be eliminated does not apply to me. So please, guys, help me out. One of the items imposed on us by the U.S. Treasury, mainly because the congressman that pushed this bill sort of oversold it, was that the $1.5 billion for the State Small Business Credit Initiative would result well, 10 to 1 is pretty hard to achieve, except that the U.S. Treasury has given us ways of doing it. So for instance, if we help a company buy some equipment, and that equipment purchase enables them to get a revolving line of credit from their bank without our help, because now they're producing more, they have more receivables, they have to hire more workers, they need to buy more inventory in order to meet the new demand. Even though we're not involved in that new revolving line and we help them get more inventory, and they need new forklift trucks, and they do a capital lease to get those forklift trucks, capital lease being very similar to a loan, we can count that as well. Also, we're kind of hoping that the loans that we make out there pay us back, and as these funds that does not include other government funds, private sector funding, and the federal funding that we're providing under the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And by the way, the name of our program is Advantage Illinois, because you can't do any good unless you have a sexy name, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, you're probably saying, okay, I'm a small business, but, you know, I'm growing. How big is a small business? Well, we're talking about some of the biggest small businesses you can imagine. There are the other programs, or another 3 buckets that we have available to help small businesses. On the Capital Access Program, the size of the company cannot be more than 500 employees, and the average of all the companies we help must be 500 or less. Well, 500 is a pretty big small business. However, on the other programs, 750 or less employees. Now, what happens if a company has 752 employees? Okay, folks out there that have 752 employees, send 2 of them on a long-term vacation, ask us for money, then hire them back. It's the number of employees that you have when you ask us for financial assistance. 750 employees is a really large small business. The average loan or investment size, well, many of you know our programs from the past. You'll see a dramatic increase in the size and the maximum is $5 million. Under the other programs that we have, and that includes our investment program, the average dollar amount that we're allowed to have after 6.5 years, we figure out that average after 6.5 years, by the way, is $5 handle anybody over 750 employees. But there's some third by July 29th, 2013. So we have door. Oh, where do we stand at this time? Well, we've just put some finishing touches on our final documents. They are going to be posted on the web, on the Advantage Illinois website. That will be under a little tab that says lenders, or for lenders. That's where the banks go in order to get their master agreements. Okay, here's an old program. It was started by Michigan in the 1980s, when I was young and beautiful. And it's still going, although not as popular as it used to be. We think it's going to be a lot more popular than it is now. How it operates? Well, I'm going to go to the next slide, and we'll come back to this one. You're probably amazed at the wonderful graphics that I have talent for. And yes, I'm also working for Lucas DreamWorks here. That bucket that you see there is a reserve account at one of each of those loans. The borrower gets charged a fee of between 2 and 5%, depending on negotiations between the bank and the borrower. Those fees go into that reserve account. Then we, under the Advantage Illinois program, match the fee that is put into that reserve account by the borrower, or actually by the fee. DCEO matches with another 3%. That means that that bucket now contains 6% of that loan as a reserve. Now, when the auditors and regulators come to the banks and they say, oh, look, you have all of these small business loans, you have to establish a reserve against losses on these small business loans of, let's say, 10%. The bank already has 6% in the bucket. So they don't have to use their own capital to any large extent in order to capital challenged. In terms of the borrowers, this may not be the best program for the borrowers. However, it is quick. Because you see, once the bank signs a master agreement, that master agreement entitles them to enroll loans in the program. That means that we don't go check on the creditworthiness of each and every borrower. We give the bank certain guidelines. They periodic basis. So that means that this is the kind of loan that the bank can basically make and then notify us about after the fact. Can we go back, please? Okay. So what are we talking about? Well, the fee charged to the borrower would be between 2 and 5%. We've lowered those fees from 3 to 7% in the past. The fee is supposed to be paid by the borrower and the lender, but almost always the lender has the borrower pay the lender's portion. $1,000 or less. And of course we lost a number of banks because that was not really that impactful. However, we've now raised the bank's loan size of $1 million. Are limited to 2 years. So you get a 2-year commitment from the bank. Um, without charging you a fee by might be the top. This is our main program, the participation loan loan program. Many of you are familiar with it. Basically what we do is we go to the bank and we say, hey, look, and the state of Illinois, under the Advantage Illinois program, bought a portion of the loan to the bank's portion. Would you then make the loan? Now let me tell you how that works. Let's say on $1 million loan, we buy $250,000 of that loan. In the event of a liquidation, and by the way, the reason I'll be mentioning liquidation a lot is because that's of concern to banks. That's their worst case scenario. And also the bank would liquidate the company, and that includes all personal and corporate guarantees, and then would apply the proceeds of the liquidation first to their expenses, which are limited, but they still have expenses in making a collection. Then to their interest, at their interest rate, because our interest rate will be subsidized on our portion, and then to their principal. On its portion of the money, of the loan rather. See how that works? In essence, the bank that would normally say, well, you know, you don't have enough equity or you don't have enough collateral, would be looking at the money we put get access to 100%, first access to 100% of the guarantees and the assets of the company. The company is 51% owned and operated minority, women, and disabled stuff. If there's a company that is 51% owned and controlled by minority, women, disabled, or veterans, just because they happen to be of those classes does not mean that this is the best program for them. So I'll go into the program a little later, and you'll see that this is a program mainly to start retail businesses for small retail businesses for minorities, women, or disabled entrepreneurs. We have a program one a lot simpler, a lot more amenable to the banks in terms of administration, and we're going to see a lot of activity here. Also, mainly to really help the banks to help small business, we have two SBA supported programs that work in conjunction with SBA programs, the SBA 7A and the SBA 504 program. So let's talk about our standard program. This is our standard participation loan program. Like I mentioned, our participation is actual cash delivered to the bank. It is subordinated to the lender's credit exposure. Once the banker has signed, or the bank has signed the master agreement, and it only has to be signed by one officer, every other officer in that bank, anywhere in the world, as long as they're putting money in Illinois, is in that program. The documentation that is needed for a particular deal after the master agreement is signed is very simple. How many of you out there believe that a government program has about 2/3 of the page? Mainly because the borrower has already provided a whole bunch of information to the lender, and the lender has synthesized that information in a credit memorandum in order to get their internal approvals. Since we get a copy of that credit memorandum, we already have the borrower's information synthesized and shortened so that we don't need a lot of information from the borrower. Our typical structure is 25% of the project, 50% of the loan that we're participating in, up to $2 million. Our previous guideline was $750,000. Is putting in, whether it's voluntary or asked for by the bank, and then any other money that's coming in to the project or to this particular effort. So it could be that you're getting a second loan from another source that we're not involved in. We can count that as part of the project. In an SBA 504 deal, it would include the SBA portion. It could include subordinated debt from one of the shareholders. Just any other money. We typically call that anyway. Our maximum on our typical standard participation loan is 10 years. That does not mean that you can go, you can't do real estate, which normally is amortized over 20 to 30 years. What it means is that after 10 years, our portion would be refinanced under a balloon structure. So in other words, it would be 25 years, but 10 years with a balloon, and after that balloon is there, then the bank would refinance for the remaining 15 years, or 10 or 15 years. For other businesses. Okay? This $2 million, you see it's depending on job creation or retention. Job creation is where we ask the borrower their professional guess as to how many jobs they think they're going to create over the next 2 years. It's a guess. It's a professional guess. We review it, but generally we have to go with the number that you provide if you're a small business. Retention has to do with jobs that are at risk. Now, we have helped companies or buy new equipment. Well, those jobs are at risk because if we don't help them, those jobs will be lost to the payrolls in the state. Also, if a company is operating well, however they want to expand and they've been made offers by other states or, other states, what we do is we encourage the company to stay in Illinois by providing them with some attractive financing under our participation loan program and count the jobs that would we count not only the jobs that they're going to create by the expansion, but also the jobs that they're not going to take away from us by changing their mind and staying in Illinois. Our interest rate will be below market on our portion. Okay, so our interest rate will typically be 2% or so below what the bank is charging on their portion. However, let me confirm, we're not talking about two loans. And us. The only influence we have on the documentation is that the promissory note will bear the blended weighted interest rate of the bank's portion and our portion times our respective interest rates. So let me just give you a quick example. The bank has 3/4 of the deal, we have 1/4. The bank's interest rate is 6, our rate is 4. The promissory note will say 5.5%. And you think, what a great bank, they gave me a 5.5% rate. Well, not quite. They gave you 6, we gave you 4 on our respective portions. Concerning the creation and retention of jobs, typically our amount is guided by that 25% of the project, 50% of the loan, or the number of jobs to be created and or retained times between $25,000 or $50,000 $50,000. It depends how long the loan is. If it's a 10-year loan, we'll probably go $25,000 per job. If it's a short loan, we'll go $50,000 per job. Mainly because, again, we need to get this money back, and the more we can get back, the more we can relend, the easier it is for us to make that leverage number that the U.S. Treasury wants us to meet. We actually can go a little higher, and I'll explain that later when we get to the Minority, Women, Disabled, and Veteran program. The funds in our loans cannot be used for passive real estate. That means that if you're going to be buying a building, you must use at least 51% of the building. The other 49% you could lease out on day one, but you must use 51% of the building or the real estate or whatever space you're buying happens to be. However, here's a new thing. We can do refinancing. Now, you know, in the past, every time you mentioned refinancing, we'd call the state trooper as your loan at Bank A is being refinanced by another bank, let's say Bank B. Okay? So as long as the loan is being taken from one bank to another, even if you're getting more financing from the second bank, we can actually assist the refinancing of your loans with another bank. So if your bank is capital challenged, not lending, wants to get out of the business, told you to leave, we can now help for minority, women, disabled, and veteran-owned businesses. We added veterans about 2 years ago, so as a veteran I was pretty happy to hear about that. The basic structure is similar to the standard participation loan program, except that we can go only $200,000. Oh my. And we can't go 10 years, we can only go 7 years. But notice that we can go 40% of the project or 50% of the loan, whichever is less. That means if you need $500,000 to start a business, we go into the bank and we say, look, you're not willing to do the $500,000? Would you be willing to do $300,000 with us putting in the other $200,000 and fully subordinating our $200,000 to your $300,000 exposure? This is a very powerful program. In terms of the number of deals we've done, this, even under the old system, was our most used program. It may not have been the biggest program in terms of dollars, but it certainly was the program that I'm proudest of, because we went from point zero and you'll notice that based on the federal guidelines, instead of $20,000 to $50,000 per full-time equivalent, for minority, women, disabled, and veterans, we can go up to $65,000 per job. Again, limited by the 40% of the project or 50% of the loan. This is a program for revolving lines of credit. Yes, you could do a revolving line of credit with our participation loan program. Give you a quick example. You're looking for a revolving line of credit of $1 million. We take $250,000 of it. We send that $250,000 to the bank. Now, previously, the bank had to keep track of that money and had to pay us statutory interest, which at that time was about 2% per annum, on the funds The banks hated doing all of that administration, and also they had to go to their client and say, you know what, we're going to have to charge you for the interest that we're paying to the state for money that you're not even using. So that's why the program wasn't really that actively used. Okay, there's a question there. What's the difference between a project and a loan? Let's say that you're building a building and you are using the SBA 504 program. That happens to be a loan. Let's say that you also need some money for a term loan to buy tables and chairs and phones and computers and carpeting, leasehold improvements, other things that wouldn't be in that same loan for the building. Those or more than one source of funds coming in to support a particular effort, that's called a project. Now we'll go back to the revolving line of credit. What we've done to make it easier on the banks to understand this and actually like this program is that we will charge the bank but that's on the entire $250,000 in that example I gave you, which means they don't have to follow the money up and down and up and down. They don't have to go charge their customer for those funds that they're not using. Basically, they could maybe put a little increment on the interest rate that they're charging the client, or maybe a little increment on the commitment fee that they're charging on the overall line in order to compensate themselves for money that we're giving them at below their normal cost. Liquidate the company, apply it first to their own exposure, and will be last. Okay? So again, the bank gets risk mitigation, they get money below their cost of funds. They would be really dumb not to lend you money under this program. And frankly, under all the programs. Next, please. Here's a program so much that, well, that we're embarrassed. But then again, we want to get the money out the door to use businesses. And so this is what we're doing. Most of you are probably familiar with the SBA 7A program. It's a guarantee program from the Small Business Administration that provides what's called a deficiency guarantee. That means it doesn't guarantee the bank's loan. It guarantees what is left after the bank has made a loan, the loan's gone bad, and the bank has liquidated the company. On these kinds of deals, in order to separate the bank's note or the bank's exposure from ours, because the Small Business Administration will not provide again, we will be subordinated to both the bank and the SBA. Now let's take a look at how this looks like in real life. Let's say that there's a $1 million loan, and this is without us being involved. Excuse us. Let's say that there is a $1 million loan, and that $1 million loan suddenly goes into liquidation. Boy, and that's, right after the loan is made, it goes into liquidation. Somebody didn't do their job right. Liquidating everything, including personal guarantees and any other collateral or security. There's a shortfall of $400,000. And that shortfall is all the bank's portion. Well, under the SBA 7A guarantee, the SBA will guarantee 75% of that shortfall, or $300,000, and the bank has to write off $100,000. That's their loss. Now, if we come into the rescue, we say to the bank, hey, tell you what, on this $1 million facility, we'll take 20%. Is of course a liquidation on the first day. So we have that same $1 million loan that goes into liquidation. $600,000, the same amount that is achieved during the liquidation. There's the same $400,000 shortfall. However, you'll notice that only $200,000 of it is the bank's fault, or the bank's portion. Because the other $200,000 is a subordinated portion from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity under Advantage Illinois. So when the SBA, the Small Business Administration, activates its is only $50,000. We've cut their potential loss in half. We expect a lot of activity from the banks on this. But we have other programs that are even more exciting. Here's the participation loan program for the SBA 504 program. The SBA 504 program is one where we participate with the Small Business Administration 504 program that supports land, building, and capital equipment. Land, building, and capital equipment. What is capital equipment? Well, think of it as being on an auction floor, and if you kicked it, you'd hurt yourself. Fields has some residual value, unlike furniture and fixtures and computers and phones and carpeting and things like that. Our maximum participation, if we're only doing an SBA 504 deal, is the portion that would normally be the equity portion for the borrower. Under a 504 structure, typically, the bank does 50% and has first lien on the real estate or capital equipment. The SBA goes up to 40%. It could go as low as 30% if it's but the remaining amount, 10 to 20%, would be equity provided by the borrower. Well, suppose the borrower doesn't have the equity. Or maybe the borrower does have the equity, but they want to use it because they're expanding, they're getting a new building. For God's sakes, they want to use it for capital purchases, capital expenditures, okay, or for working capital. So what happens? Creditor agreement with the Small Business Administration that allows us to be part of the bank's note. So in other words, instead of a 50% note, they would have a 60% note, the other 40% being taken care of by the SBA. Okay, and let's see now. Let's go to the next slide, because we'll show you how really powerful we can be in this kind of a scenario. Okay, you're buying a building. And by the way, the SBA says that we can finance your equity portion under two provisions. Number one, you have to have equity somewhere. You have to have some skin in the game. So obviously, your equity portion cannot be any more favorable than the bank's loan. Well, our loan is the bank's loan. We're part of the bank's loan. So we fit there, and that's why we have this intercreditor agreement that allows us to be part of the bank's note and yet subordinated to both the bank and the SBA. But here's a $3 million project, and this is without our support. Remember, we're looking at this from the bank's point of view because that's all the guys do anyway. The bank has to put up 50% or $1 million on this $2 million building. but you're also asking them for a UTL. Nobody out there knows what a UTL is because I made it up. It's my invention. It's called an ugly term loan. It's the kind of loan that bankers hate. It's for a loan on collateral that isn't worth anything once it goes out of the Okay, so here you can see the bank has to put up $2 million of this $3 million project. But let's see what happens when DCEO steps in with the Advantage Illinois program. We look at this as a $3 million project. See, that goes to that question that was asked, the difference between a loan and a project. This is a $3 million project. Therefore, let's look at the building first. The building is $2 million. The SBA is saying, okay, bank, you have to put up 50% or $1 million. The SBA has to put up 40%, which is $800,000. We will put up the 10% that should have been put up by the borrower's equity, or $200,000. But remember, guys, we do 25% of the project, or 50% of the loan, whichever is less. This project is $3 million. 25% of the project is $750,000. What are we going to do with that other $550,000 that we'd like to help the small business with? Well, what instead of having to put up $1 million for the ugly term loan, only has to put up $500,000. And here's what really makes ugly term loan, you can bet. But here's what makes it extra special for the banks. And unfortunately, building. The bank is first with their $1 million. The SBA is second. Term loan. We basically let them cross-collateralize, thus meaning our $700,000 exposure is really above little else than the borrower's equity in the event of a liquidation. This is very attractive. We've been doing this for about 5 years. It's just that I haven't done a very good job of it, that assists banks that want to do loans for you, but you know what? They're not having a very easy time raising deposits. Well, this is what we'll do. We'll say to the bank, okay, on this $1 million that the borrower is asking for, you're saying that there's not enough equity or collateral, especially collateral. It might be a service business that doesn't have very good collateral, mostly less, just one big ugly term loan. Okay, tell you what. We will put up 20% of that loan. If you make the full $1 million loan, we'll put up 20% or whatever, and they just pay us what they pay everybody else who walks in the door. We might consider it. On this $1 million deal where we have $200,000 on deposit, every anniversary of when that money is first dispersed, we get back 1/5 of our deposit. And as the loan is paid down normally, we continue to get 1/5 of our deposit every anniversary year until the loan is fully paid down, because the loan amortizes 20% every year, or the principal of the loan amortizes 20% every year. However, if during that 5-year period the loan goes into default and the borrower is being liquidated, the funds that we have in that collateral account in essence, if the bank tells you you don't have enough collateral, this is another program that they can use in order to offset any shortfall that you might have in the collegial in sharing their documentation and their structure. But they threw in a heck of a lot of fees. A 3% annual fee, 3% charged on the amount in the collateral account every year, plus a penalty fee when the banks actually took the collateral. We just eliminated those. We want to get this money out the door, helping businesses as the states got permission to run their own venture capital program, but we showed them that we had the kind of staff, the expertise, the connections, in order to run a venture capital program where we have the ability to invest in common stock, preferred shares, and or any other equity or quasi-equity instrument, for instance, like convertible subordinated debentures. We have a venture capital panel. And the creation of jobs that really are upper level, higher paying jobs. Now, what we want to do is get the companies standing, stable, able to attract other venture capital, able to attract senior debt, able to get revolving lines of credits from commercial banks. And once that happens, we're going to start getting itchy. You can sort of call it the 5-year itch. We're figuring after 5 years, these companies will either having one company and riding it forever when there are other companies that need venture capital. Now, a very important point is that let's see, what is the very important point? Oh, I forgot what the very important point is. I told you I was old. Anyway, this venture capital, and we have the staff that will assist you in putting together the kind of application that will get you the money. The thing I wanted to tell you is we are not an anchor investor. Do not come to us first. We're looking for you to have approximately $5 of either in equity investments, new equity investments, It's not our role to start a venture capital raising. It is our role to help a venture capital raising that's having a little trouble close with our money. Okay? We are gap fillers, sort of like dentists, which my dad wanted me to become, but no, I became, well, I don't know what I became. But anyway, this is a very good program for keeping This is our website, and you'll see in the left-hand column that where it says Advantage Illinois, it has a list of some of the programs: Capital Access Program, Participation Loan Program, Collateral Support Program. Those three programs are Under that, you'll see Illinois Innovation Venture Fund. Like I said, it's not worth anything unless you have a sexy name. That's our venture capital program, and that's generally for companies that are looking for venture capital. Under that, you'll see a tab that says For Lenders. If that is clicked on, it contains the master agreements and other systems kind of information or administrative information or servicing type information for banks. When you and I go to a lender, and then we can of course move forward with your deal. And the last thing I got to say is thank you for this very nice opportunity to speak to really so many people. I'm really amazed. 200 people on this call. Wow.
So what we'll do is switch over to the Q&A. I've maintained this chat list of all the questions that were being asked. I don't want you to feel that we were ignoring you through the webinar. To put you in a queue for those that want to ask questions on, so the floor request mode, I'll turn that on. You can ask via the audio.
The floor mode is on. To request the floor, enter star, then pound.
You can do star pound, and I'll see if somebody's asking a question on the phone. We'll start with the questions in the chat pod, and I'll switch off. So the first question was by Diana King. So no micro startups.
The answer to that is no, that's not true. We have other programs where actually the state of Illinois provided $5 million to 4 entities, although one of them is not quite active right now, to Acción Chicago, to Women's Business Development Center, which is on Michigan Avenue, and to the Illinois Ventures for And another place for microloans, including startups, is the Capital Access Program. Remember, we can do small deals there. The bank just has to register the loan, and boom, it's done. The bank makes the loan, they establish the reserve, we match the reserve, you got your loan.
The other question was, does this initiative include micro businesses, or is it only designated to small businesses? And I think some of that was covered through the chat, but if you want to just go ahead and comment on that.
Business, I'm only looking for $100,000. Well, that's not micro business. We'll gladly help you with our regular programs. If it's micro business, and by that we mean something less than $10,000, then we generally send you to Acción or Women's Business Development Center or Illinois Ventures for Community Action, and they can go up to micro business because so many of you in those kinds of businesses have been turned down. Please understand, this is a new world. We have money.
Very, very new world. We have a question on the phone, so go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I was asking a question about, did this program help build non-for-profit organizations?
This program currently is not available to nonprofits, not-for-profits. Again, this is the use it for businesses that pay taxes, businesses that increase employment, that bring new products, things like that. Are we going to have a program for nonprofits? We've asked Treasury to see about that. But right now it's not for nonprofits or not-for-profits.
The other thing that I added on the chat was to go ahead and check out the donors forum. So if you access the donors forum, they'd be more helpful in that type of sector, businesses or social enterprises or organizations that you may be interested in developing. Okay, I'm going to go back to the do you have to have a squeaky clean credit to obtain a CAP?
Believe it or not, we're looking for companies that don't have squeaky clean credit. Because remember, according to state law, if the bank is willing to do the project or the loan without us, by law, we're not allowed to be involved because then we would be competing with the banks. So if you're bankable without us, then by law we can't be involved, and frankly, it would be against the law for me to help. In terms of the CAP program, it's up to the bank. Remember, the bank is going to be charging you a fee, and we're going to be matching that fee, and we're not even going to check your credit. On the other programs, yes, we check your credit, but you know what? We've actually made loans to companies that had declared bankruptcy. Depends what the bankruptcy was caused by. In one case, it was caused by a divorce. In another case, it was caused by medical problems. But there was a good business plan. It was well-structured, earnest. The bank was willing to go ahead, and as long as the bank was willing to go ahead, then we were too. We do not have a minimum credit score. Come to us and they say, look, this is a 600 score. What do you think? We take a look at the numbers, and then we go ahead if the bank feels there's a reasonable probability of repayment. That's the measure we use, reasonable probability of repayment.
I actually just saw a question up here that I'm going to jump to the top because I think it's a perfect segue into some of the information Stan will share. Melanie asked, how do we inform the banks about this program?
Communications and public relations departments are here. We have someone named Lisa Stott who basically has been guiding our public relations effort. Basically, the governor has a letter, I don't know if it's gone out yet or if it's going out shortly, that has been drafted for him, asking the presidents of all the banks, or the chief executive officers of all the banks that are located in Illinois, to get their banks involved in this program. Talking to banks and talking to accounting firms and talking to lawyers and of course talking to customers as well, borrowers as well, in order to get them involved in the program. Now, I saw a question there saying, do you have a list of participating banks? You'll see on the website it says to be announced, or coming soon or something like that. The fact of the matter is this is a brand new program. It hasn't been put on WikiLeaks yet, so that's how new it is. And basically the banks haven't signed our new agreements yet. To have an appointment with us and the bank, we will be able to put that agreement right in front of your bank. They sign it, we list them as a participating bank. It is not a complicated process to become a registered participating bank. You sign a master agreement, that says, okay, we agree to these rules, we agree to talk to the client, because after the loan is made, we do not talk to you. You basically are the bank's client, as you normally would be if the bank was lending you all the money, and we are in the bank.
Dan and I don't sit too far away from each other, so start an Illinois Worknet business account. It's free. I know I bombard you all with a lot of emails, but they're really, really relevant. Like what I was saying before, we don't have a lot of money, but we'll give you some information. Now we have information and money, so get connected. Really great resources that will be passed on to you, and that's the fastest way that you can find out, because you may not be connected to the various networks within the governor's communication efforts. So started a free account, and Diane Reinhardt asked, well, two questions. Can this be used for land lease where the borrowers will never own the land, i.e. housing authority land? And then in Springfield and Sangamon County, look at project innovation.
Okay, I can't answer the second question because I don't know what project innovation is. But in terms of land lease, actually one of our biggest deals, one of the ones I'm most proud of, is a theater that used to have 8 employees and now has 200. Because the new owner built a huge atrium, decorated the theater with memorabilia and antiques, and invites celebrities for autograph signings. It's the biggest and eat while you watch the movie kind of places. The tickets are only $8. Anyway, all of the property itself is leased from the owner of that particular shopping center. However, all the antiques and all the decorations and all the waterfall with the King Kong standing on the top of the mountain and all this other stuff that they have in there, all that are leasehold improvements. Now, I will tell you that when you go to finance something like that, you better have a little equity, and you better have the good graces of the SBA 7A program, because they won't do SBA 504 when you're talking only leasehold improvements. But we have done loans where the land is not going to is not used by, is not owned by the borrower. But again, it does make it a little difficult to finance because we're talking about what is almost an ugly term loan. Because the collateral, basically leasehold improvements belong to the owner of the property.
One of the questions that was asked by Michael is, what's the average interest rate on these loans?
That's like asking me what's the average interest rate on the bank loans. We're going to be 2 to 2.25% or so below what the bank is charging. The bank charges you 5, we'll charge you 3. Bank charges you 8, we'll tell you to go to another bank. No, we'll charge you something less than 6. The idea is, we used to base it off of treasuries. Treasuries are just like wacko. We don't know where they're going, what they're doing. Neither does the government. So basically, take the interest rate that the bank is going to charge you and subtract.
Illinois Ventures for Community Action.
Well, I guess if you just go to Google and you type in Illinois Ventures for Community Action and look up Springfield, Illinois, they should be there. The name of the person is John Action.
And along with that, I'm sure that the Ventures program is also very willing to act as intermediaries for those looking to find these types of opportunities and to help educate the various investors out there.
Illinois Ventures is terrific, as are many of the SBDCs. And in fact, when Illinois Ventures for Community Action is using their own money from their own resources, typically revolving loan funds and things like that, or other investments, it's a public-private nonprofit. We actually participate with them. They are our participating lender. So yes, John Farrell would be somebody
For, I would be replacing the current bank. Market conditions have impacted the collateral to a point where we are uncomfortable with what our position would be. Is this the type of scenario that the program could help with?
Yikes. Okay, you're not planning on refinancing the SBA 504 portion, I'm assuming, because typically there's a pretty hefty prepayment penalty, and I don't think the SBA under the 504 program portion. Yes, we can go with another bank. We have to work with the SBA, and we have to work with the new bank. But yes, our actually our plain old participation loan program would probably be the one that you would look to there.
Okay, the last question is by Curtis. He asks, will the program work with credit unions?
Commercial banks, or financial institutions they call them, but basically it was financial institutions that were regulated by state or federal banking authorities, which made them banks, and then also CDFIs, or Community Development Financial Institutions. However, in our effort to start working with other lenders like GECC or Rockford Local Development Corporation, come out with some new guidance that we can feel comfortable working with these other lenders, but they're going to come out with some new guidance that will allow us to work with these other types of lending institutions. However, they re-emphasize that it is up to the state to justify their working with any particular lender. So we would basically, if it's not a bank that's regulated by then we have to keep track of the creditworthiness and the experience and the ability to run a servicing unit in the back room for companies like GECC or credit unions or others. So the answer is, it's not right now in the guidelines.
I know people are sharing information. I'm going to go ahead and also include the information on how to start Illinois Worknet business accounts. And also in the file share, if you've noticed, and the reason why I share with you information on the portal is because in 2010 we had about 2.5 million hits. That means 1 to 8 pages were accessed. And what that means is we want you to leverage this type, harness this type of traffic and move it to your business, move it to your website, move it to your Facebook page, whatever that may be. We're giving you that option. Posted. to business@illinoisworknet.com. There's a question up
Yeah,
here.
I see some comments concerning starting a new business, and advice is being given that might be slightly off point. Frankly, if you're starting a business and you go to a bank, yes, the bank will typically ask for your personal guarantee and will ask you to put up some sort of equity. When the SBA is involved, there are many banks that will also ask for a lien on your personal residence. This is if you're a new business. So, no, the banks aren't, SBA is not more liberal than the banks. However, our programs are addressed to the banks saying, hey, look, if there's a shortage of collateral, or if the borrower doesn't have the equity, let us and we will be subordinated to the bank, so it's just like the borrower putting in equity. It is our role to help people like, I think it's Greg, get his business started.